about your involvement with CompTIA to start out, since you spend a lot of time giving back to the industry and you've been involved in some of the advisory councils that Rob's been running?
Yes. I originally, my first council that I ran, I was the chair of the Telecom Advisory Council, and that was a number of years ago. And when that was disbanded, then I was part of the Distributor Council. And when that was things, I left that position and I took a role on the Executive Council for Advancing Women in Technology,
Which is
where I'm at
terrific.
right now.
Yeah, which is terrific. And for all of you women in the room, we on behalf of them, we appreciate you for being a sponsor of women in the technology space. So I'm not sure if the fintech space has the same problems that the technology space does, but I suspect it might. So we appreciate that. So if you can talk a little bit about CompTIA's role in advancing the channel, could be very helpful to understand why you got involved, how it
Look,
helps.
I want to say partially I'm selfish. And there's over 1 million unfulfilled positions right now in technology, 1 million. And it's everything from fintech down to help desk for MSPs out there. There's 1 million unfulfilled jobs. And advancing women in technology, I have 4 daughters, by the way. So that was part, I want to give back because I'm hoping other people will give back to them also. But let's be realistic that we're never going to fill 1 million positions when we're neglecting half of the population. It doesn't make any sense, right? So just from a pure business standpoint, that's where we need to be.
Excellent, thank you. So as I mentioned, Jeff's businesses span many of the channel models, so he's an excellent person to talk to about the different types of channel partners that are available to you, as well as how they might be able to help you. So I did the quick 20,000 foot view of your businesses, but I'd love for you to explain the different models that you're in.
Yeah, so I started a master agency in the telecom space coming up on 17 years ago. And so in our world, you have two kind of distribution models. You had the master agency, and agency really in itself meant that we didn't hold the contract with the end customer. So if I had a contract myself with AT&T, our partner, I received a check from AT&T. I didn't send a bill to my end customers. Whereas in the distribution model, and you probably know Ingram Micro, Tech Data, those companies, that was more of a wholesale model where, you bought that HP server or that Cisco router at a 30% discount, you marked it up and you sold that to the end customer, but you were the one who billed that end customer. And that was the biggest difference of the two. The other was that my world always came from a recurring revenue standpoint from day one, and that's not an easy model to start, by the way, because when you start with nothing, you can double your business, still nothing, right? And so it takes quite a while to build up that type of a business. But once you have a recurring revenue model built, I don't think there's any better business you can be in, because the reality is I've launched multiple businesses because I had the cash flow, the recurring revenue cash flow that I could take risk, because I knew if this failed over here, I still had this company over here that was throwing off cash flow.
Hmm. And speaking of some of these other ventures that you're in, you have a systems integration company.
I do. The biggest thing I think everybody in this room has to always understand is what's the DNA of their partner, and is your DNA different? Because if you get two like people in the same room, there's no point for one of them, right? So what is your DNA, and what are you bringing to the table that's different than they have? Now, I focused from the very beginning on working with IT consultants, MSPs, VARs, as Rob was talking about, because we had a different DNA than theirs. I was a telecom focused company. Now, everything they sell takes connectivity, whether it was a voice line or whether it was internet, it all took connectivity. They didn't have the same DNA, so I went and hired engineers that were different than theirs, and we supported them and we shared the revenue. It was a fairly simple model, but we both brought something to the table. So we did all the heavy lifting for them on the telco side, but that end customer, by the way, didn't even know we existed. probably 90% of the time because we were really supporting the MSP or VAR or telecom agent.
Okay. So that leads to a very interesting question for these guys. So how do they get attention of a partner either in a distribution model like you or an MSP, a VAR, referral, even a referral partner, some of these
Yeah.
adjacent partners that Rob talked about?
Well, look, we have referral partners too, people who just want to throw a lead and get paid. But quite honestly, you're never going to boil the ocean in that model. So because we were a master agent, I can pay an agent probably double than that they're going to make if they went and signed a direct agreement, and they have no commitment with me, and I'm going to pay a referral partner 3 times probably what they're going to make by just throwing you a lead because we have that expertise to help with that end customer. But you got to bring something to the table that's different. My suggestion would be, and Kelly and I, Rob, were actually talking about this offline a little earlier, is you need to spend a little time speed dating. With different industries. I'll give you an example. I have a unified communications company, hosted voice company, that they specialize in the dental vertical, and they got into that dental vertical because somebody was relayed to somebody who was managing one of the leading ERPs for dental practices. Who knew, right? Because most dental dentists are pretty small businesses. So they integrated their unified communications platform with that ERP. You should be doing your payment platform should be part of that, right? So and I'm just using that one as an example. There's hundreds of verticals. I can tell you my partners, the ones that do the absolute best, are the verticalized guys, the ones that know the business, whether it's the dental, the manufacturer, whatever it is, the people who know that space well on the business side, those are the guys who are going to do the best, and those are the guys who are going to create the sticky customers for you, by the way.
And the reason is because what? They understand that business's challenges.
They understand the market. So,
Okay.
if you come in and just offer a service, you're a salesperson. If you come in with business acumen, you're a consultant. I'd rather talk to a consultant, especially if it's not costing me anymore.
Mm-hmm. Which is an interesting point. So some of them do charge fees, but you probably know quite a number of them that are paid on the back end by their vendors.
I do. I know a lot of consultants that make consulting fees on a lot of things that I give them for free.
Yeah. So I'm not sure who's smarter in that case, though.
Recurring revenue. Remember, go back to the recurring revenue.
Yeah, right. Okay.
I like
so
recurring
you're getting
revenue.
recurring revenue on the back
And
end.
they are
right,
too, by the way.
okay.
And I would have never had that customer if it wasn't for that partner. So I would have never known their name. I wouldn't have known how to help position the partner with that customer. Wouldn't have known.
Mm-hmm. So Rob talked a little bit about the compensation, and that's something that's really competitive in the IT space, particularly on the services side. So I'm wondering about if you can speak to that. Is that a big deal?
Well, almost all of our partners' core competency is different than mine. They sell. They're an MSP. They sell desktop. They take care of the customer's ecosystem. So the product that what we're doing for them is an add-on, and so they're not going to risk their core competency unless they have a good partner to work with. So one of the things you need to do is you need to be really good at what you do. Don't be so salesy. It's a relationship business. Channel partners love long-term relationships. I can tell you the channel partner that I've worked with, the 2 I've worked with the longest has been over 20 years. I've known them for over 20 years. I mean, that's kind of that's trust. I've got one of those channel partners, by the way, who sent a cookie bouquet to my house when my youngest daughter was born 20 years ago, and that girl works for me now, and he works with her.
Oh, wow.
Think about that for a second. So, I mean, it's a relationship business. So, the relationship has to withstand the transaction. You have to, telling the truth, thinking long-term, not just a 30-day sales cycle. That's what channel partners are looking for.
Interesting. All right. And so you talked earlier today with Rob and I about this idea of becoming part of an ecosystem, not just coming and saying, sell my whatever it
Correct.
is that I'm offering.
Yeah.
So how do they do that, and what do they need to
Well,
do?
I guess I'm going to plug CompTIA here a little bit. So we just had ChannelCon, Rob, what, a couple weeks ago in Vegas. How many vendors were there? Right. And how many different um, business types? Right. So you had security guys, you had telecom people. It was the whole gambit of the technology industry. So what I would tell you is you need to spend some time learning how to speed date. What are there's ERPs out there that you aren't part of. We all know who Salesforce.com is, right? The first time I went to Dreamforce, which is their big event they have in San Francisco every year, there was only 8,000 uh, participants, right? But they had just announced the year before that they were giving their development platform away for basically free. I think it was like $300 a year, and you literally could develop on top of their platform. And and that year, I believe there's 8,000 people at Dreamforce, and this last year there was just shy of 200,000. So they built an ecosystem that allowed everybody to plug in to what they've built. They built a CRM. At the end of the day, it's a CRM, right? But there's thousands of different vendors now that have plugged in to Salesforce that you can't even buy their product unless you buy Salesforce. It's kind of a brilliant model, right? So it doesn't have to be Salesforce, but what verticals or what kind of products would you could you integrate with, right? Whether is that ERP, it's a CRM, it's e-commerce, it's whatever. How many e-commerce platforms are there out there, right? I'm going to say hundreds, probably. Are you picking up the phone and calling with them and trying to cross-pollinate with them into the marketplace? That's where you're going to win. Not selling a product. You're going to go in there as a team, with a solution, right? Not just the product. You're going to sell a lot more of what you do by being part of a solution versus trying to go out there and sell one at a time, one at a time.
Another area that's super on the minds of IT channel partners is the security aspects. And I believe in the previous session, Chester was talking about that, where security is really top of mind on the fintech side too. So there may be some synergies there where you're getting some of the experts in security that are dealing with these small and medium-sized businesses to potentially, sell a more secure fintech
Yeah,
payment system.
I asked Chester the question. I don't know if you guys heard, because I saw that slide. 85% of all of us, all of our data is unencrypted. That should seem like a huge opportunity to you, right? So who are you going to network with now in order to sell your services? I would think of compliance people, right? There's a lot of compliance people out there. CPAs. Would you have ever thought selling payments going to CPAs? Well, CPAs are very, they care a lot about their customer, the compliance of their customers. So think about this. They can raise the bar and make some money on working on the compliance, and then they can work with you on that payment side, because somebody's dropping the ball now, right? So the vendor they have now is obviously dropping the ball of 85%. 85% is unencrypted.
Both of those adjacent categories Rob brought up, the marketing firms that are doing the e-commerce systems and the accountants, two of the adjacent channels, both of those could be good inroads for a more secure payment platform.
So one more I would strongly suggest, and I don't know if any of you have seen Tiffany Bova speak. She speaks at a lot of technology events and stuff. She's the kind of person you'll have 1,000, 1,500 people in a room listening to every word she says. And for years, she always said, if you're not an integrator, you need to get to know one. And what she really meant by that is somebody has to bolt the pieces of the ecosystem together. Somebody has to do the integration, whether it's a legacy platform to a cloud-based platform, e-commerce to QuickBooks. Not everything, not everything is Salesforce.com, right? There's a whole lot of CRMs that aren't Salesforce.com. Are you guys calling them? I bet that there's 100 CRMs out there.
Oh, yeah, at least.
At least, right? that aren't Microsoft Dynamics. It's not Salesforce. You should be talking to them. But if you're not an integrator, get to know one. And by the way, I'm an integrator, just so you know. So that was the main reason I started my software development company. That's one of the companies I started, because it was a DNA our partners didn't have. So as we're moving into this cloud world, somebody has to do that work. Somebody has to bolt those pieces together, integrate those different pieces together. And they need to be able to do that not just for the Fortune 500 companies, but they need to be able to do that in the mid-market, even down to the SMB market.
So one of the things I wanted to ask you about was, you seem to be forward-looking as a partner. You looked for new opportunities and things you could do to move your business forward. But what does it really take for some of these guys to get to find peers of yours that might be interested in taking on an adjacent technology or entering an emerging market? Like, some of you might have really innovative payment technologies that aren't tried it, they're not what we're used to. How do we get them to embrace this?
Yeah, you got to go out and kick tires, and the best way to do that is to go to a few trade shows. The ones I strongly suggest going to. Number one would be joining CompTIA. I'm a premier member of CompTIA, and I do it on purpose because I not only get to be on all these boards and do these things, but I have access to all the research they do. And by the way, just the research alone is worth the cost of admission. But you can go to these events, whether it's ChannelCon, their big event, whether it's going to Channel Partners, which is an event that Khali actually created with Marla years ago. You got hundreds and hundreds of vendors at these things. Go talk to them. Talk to the security person. Talk to the CRM guy. Talk to these different people and find out. You need to act more like a business development person, I think, in that role than in sales. I don't know who's in what roles, but and if you don't have business development, then I would become that person. Maybe not by title, but I'd go to these events. Tell them you want to go to, the 3-day show with Channel Partners coming up in DC in a month or whenever that's going to be, in October, or ChannelCon in Miami next whatever month that's going to be. So, and those are just a couple I've mentioned. There's hundreds of shows, right? Pick the ones you want to go to. But go kick the tires. You're not necessarily going there to find new partners. You're going there to find vendor partners that you might be able to collaborate with.
So what if they are looking specifically for partners? Are you saying then they should leverage their channels?
Oh no, absolutely.
Or are you saying...
No, do that also. I think understand what you want to do, but those same shows are good for partners. But you need to tell them how you're going to fit in their ecosystem, not how they're going to fit in yours, right? I think a lot of people say, great, we're going to get a partner signed to a contract. Rob talked a lot about this. You're going to sign a contract, and all of a sudden nothing happens. What happened, right? I've signed many partners and nothing happened, by the way. As a matter of fact, I can tell you that only about 7 to 10% of my partners are actually the ones that make it worthwhile even being in business. It's a math thing you got to go through, and it takes time to figure out who they are and how you can fit in their world. But where would that best be? I think it would be in that MSP space, right? Right now, where Chester was talking about earlier, there's a huge market in the MSP space for doing HIPAA compliance. That's in the healthcare space, right? Why aren't there a lot of them in your space? Why aren't so maybe go find some of those folks that want to do that compliance work and then bring you in to save the day after the fact, right? Come in and do that payment side.
Interesting. All right. Does anyone have questions for Jeff? Okay, in the back. Yeah, it's a great point. Yeah.
So one of my little hacks is exactly that. So when we sign a new customer, and remember, it's not our customer, we still need to know we need to know a lot about that end customer. We need to know who who is handling their IT, who's their MSP, their VAR, who's who's handling their telecom. There's a lot of different moving parts in there. Well, if they're not one of our partners, we're going to send we're going to send an email to them and ask them if they want to join the team, because now they actually know us because they're getting on discovery calls and kickoff calls and things along those lines. So we actually are getting to know them, in a very low level way from a relational standpoint. So that's a great point.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's always that build or buy mentality. So I can tell you there is there's a vendor I met through CompTIA that's his entire space on the compliance side. I met him. We sat on a board together, and I don't want to do that, but I'm bringing him into the deal. I'm getting a commission. My partner's getting a commission out of that, and that's setting the table for everything else my partner wants to sell that customer. So you have to make your choice. You can't do everything, right? So I would rather partner and make a little bit of revenue on that piece to help my partner, add a whole bunch of more services to the customer. One of the first questions I always ask a partner is, what's your blended margin? In other words, because they're selling different products, right? You might be making 20% on this, 8% on this, 30% on this. What's your blended margin? And I actually can tell you, if they don't know the answer to that question, usually that's not going to be a very good agent or partner, right? But if they know that, that's usually someone that's really focused on their business. And then I get to tell them, by doing this, this, and this, I'm going to take your margin, I'm going to increase it by your blended margin by 5%. And what does that do to your top and bottom line? That's a business discussion. Most people don't do that. They just want to put a product in front of them, sign the contract, hope you throw a few deals a year my way. And it just doesn't work. This is a relationship business. And you actually need to care about each other, by the way.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to give you 15 minutes back into your lunch hour, so use it well. Thank you so much, Jeff.
Thank you.
It's been a
pleasure. And by the way, Khali says she's a marketing person, but the reality is because I've known Khali for probably coming up on 20 years, she knows channel better than anybody I know, and she can geek up as well as anybody.
Yes, I am guilty.